Hey guys, welcome back to Required Reading. This is Russ, and today we are continuing our read of the novelization of the movie Gremlins 2, The New Batch. It's written by David Bishop and based off of the motion picture that was written by Charlie Haas, and of course the characters written by created by Chris Columbus. So last week we did chapters 1 and 2. So this week we're going to be reading chapters 3 and 4. Frank Forrester, Daniel Clamp's hatchet man supreme, walked into the lobby of the Clamp Center, looking as though he owned the place. He was just that kind of guy, with his straight arrow poise, his dark Clint Eastwood looks, and his eyes cold as flint at the bottom of a mine shaft. As he walked hurriedly through the lobby, his belt page suddenly beeped. Technology was calling. And when technology called, Frank Forrester answered, pronto. He changed direction, zooming into an alcove off the lobby where he unlocked a cabinet. This opened to reveal a large high-res TV screen. Perched above this was a video camera, beaming his stern visage upstairs. And on the screen, of course, was Daniel Clamp's face, looking rather impatient. Yes, when technology called, Frank Forrester answered, especially when Daniel Clamp was on the other end of the line. "Forrester," snapped Clamp, "I've got the planning commission people coming in here today. Those condos I want to build on top of the Chrysler building. We're this close to an okay." "Yes, sir." "So I want this place running like a clock. The systems, the people, everything." "Yes, sir. I'm doing a decor compliance check this morning. Tonight I'm doing a random drug search and—" Forrester was interrupted. Excuse me, Mr. Clamp?" came an insistent voice from behind him. "Could I speak with you, Mr. Clamp, sir, for just a Forrester wheeled around. There, looking like a lost joke out of a Halloween party, was a man in full-blown Dracula get-up. He didn't look like Bela Lugosi, but more like Al Lewis as Grandpa Munster, and just about a third as scary. This was Grandpa Fred, Forrester realized immediately, apparently escaped from his coffin in Studio E. "We're busy," snarled Forrester in his least pleasant voice. Grandpa Fred attempted to get around him. "Well, I just need a—" Forrester slammed the cabinet shut. "I said we're busy." "Oh gosh, Mr. Forrester, all I wanted to do was actually speak to Mr. Clamp." An attempt at a winning smile on Grandpa Fred's face fizzled. "Doesn't anybody but you get to talk to him?" "Unless you care to get shipped back to the Borscht Belt, Grandpa, you'll get your cape and your fangs out of my face." Grandpa Fred, crushed, slept away, cape dragging behind. Forrester shook his head and opened up the cabinet again to continue his electronic tete-a-tete with his beloved boss. As Billy waited impatiently for the elevator, he recognized a familiar perfume and his spine turned rigid. Marla Bloodstone, the head of his department, aka his boss, was also waiting. "Billy," she said. "Hi, Marla. How—" Marla was smoking, as usual. She interrupted, as usual, her words coming out punctuated by puffs of cigarette smoke. "Your Chinatown drawing, we have to have it. It's a crisis panic emergency. The printers are killing us." Marla was clearly in her usual state of hyper coffee-fed melodramatic tension. She was New York frantic, in the most emphatic manner possible. She was a pretty, nice-figured woman who might have had more sex appeal but for her severe business suit, her flossed red hair, and the tons of makeup that made it look like her face was lacquered on. Otherwise, she looked like that cute lady in the American Express commercial who takes her big brother out to dinner. Oh, yeah, the drawing. I just have to. She tugged him onto the elevator, cramming in with a bunch of other office workers. Please state your desired floor number, requested the soft computer voice politely. Marla said, I've got 32 people screaming at me for. The 32 was so emphatic that it overrode her neighbor worker's feeble attempt at 16. Your request is floor 32. No, no, not 32, screeched the worker, probably late himself. No, said Billy, alarmed. This had happened before. Don't! But it was too late. You have cancelled floor 32, intoned the elevator voice portentously. It stopped in mid-rise, quite abruptly and violently, heaving its occupants around, mixing them up like tossed people salad. Please state your new desired floor number. 58, said Marla, before anybody else got a chance to pitch their numbers. Your new request is 58. The elevator started again, even as the other passengers hurled their orders. Marla shrugged. Realizing that she had dropped her cigarette somewhere along the line, she pulled out a pack from her purse with long red nails, tapped a new one out, and lit it. Smoke hurled up into the air. People glared at her. Smoking is antisocial, said the computer voice. I hate this thing, said Marla. So did Billy, but then he wasn't crazy about cigarette smoke either. Although Marla was certainly hyper, she didn't seem to be actually mad at him. Billy untensed a bit, and doing so realized that maybe Marla wasn't all that bad after all. She just had some problems, like everyone. Living in this hellhole city all your life was bound to screw you up some. As Billy stood close to his boss in the crowded elevator and considered her in this new light, he realized that she was, well, very feminine beneath that office shell. She did smell good, and she was really rather attractive. Billy chastised himself immediately. What was wrong with him? He was engaged to the most wonderful girl in the world, and here he was semi-lusting after his boss, for goodness sake. The door opened on their floor. Billy and Marla shuffled out onto the advertising department of Daniel Clamp Enterprises. Listen, this deadline, said Marla in her nasal Brooklyn accent. It's not my fault. They're making me miserable, so I have to make you miserable. It's a complete heart attack disaster horror story. This whole floor was the advertising section, and it consisted of ultra-modern, open-plan offices, endless beige partitions forming tiny cubicles full of ergonomic furniture. The company piped in white noise, low-volume static, through hidden speakers to insulate the conversations in the spacious room. As Billy and Marla walked through, they passed a worker who was trying to get a drink from one of the department's designer water fountains. When he pushed the button, the fountain spigot overshot by several inches, splashing onto the carpet. The worker contorted himself to get a drink, but got his face splashed as the fountain surged. Billy noted this. The same thing had happened to him just yesterday. They arrived at Billy's cubicle. His workstation consisted of a drawing board, several drawers, and a phone equipped with a video screen. A small potted plant struggled to survive. Pinned to the cubicle wall was Billy's drawing of the main street of his hometown, Kingston Falls. On Billy's drawing board was an illustration of Clamp's projected Chinatown building, a glass monstrosity with insane pagoda touches. Billy had tried to breathe some artistic life into it, drawing people in the street, kids flying dragon kites, and people eating from ceramic bowls with chopsticks. Billy noticed Marla staring at it, arms folded under her ample breasts. It's almost finished. I just have to make some... The courtyard looks cold. She poked with the cigarette. That'll be nicer with trees. Are they going to plant trees? Hell no! But you're going to draw them. But Marla, Elms. She gave him an authoritative glare, and he did not care to challenge her any more. Right. Billy was about to sit down and get to work, but just at that moment Daniel Clamp's lieutenant, Frank Forrester, marched down the row of cubicles, his beady eyes surveying. Suddenly Marlowe, ever political, was all smiles and good mornings. "Hi, Mr. Forrester." Forrester nodded at Marla, her attractiveness clearly lost on his metal-plated heart. He ran an eye over Billy's cubicle, grunted, and then fixed the young man with a cold stare. "It looks like somebody hasn't read his employee manual, doesn't it, Mr. As he spoke, Forrester opened a leatherette folder and took out a barcode reading wand attached to it by a curled cable. He rubbed the laser wand over the barcode on Billy's chest and read from the LCD display in the folder. "Peltzer," Forrester read. What's the problem?" "Unauthorized potted plant." Frank Forrester's eyes narrowed. "Possible aphid infestation." Hastily, Billy crammed the plant into a desk drawer. Forrester spotted Billy's drawing on the partition. "What is this?" "It's my hometown." "Mr. Peltzer, do you know how much the Clamp organization has spent to provide its employees with art by recognized artists at this facility?" He pointed to a piece of anonymous bank art on a nearby wall, a generic painting of flowers in a vase. "Eye resting, color coordinated, authorized." "Yes, sir. It was just a little touch, yes. Maybe everybody here would like to do some little touches." The severe man leaned closer, so close that Billy could smell his toothpaste. "Coffee mugs that say 'World's Greatest Lover'. The cute little hula doll they bought in Hawaii. The Snoopy comic that just says it all. You'd like that, wouldn't you, Mr. Peltzer?" Billy pulled back and looked around. "I don't see any." "Coming to work every day in a $200 million flea market." Forrester sniffed and then moved on, his eagle eyes inspecting the advertising offices. Marla stewed and fumed, quite literally fumed, smoke wafting voluminously from her nicotine stick. She tapped her feet nervously, and her eyes darted about as though she was sure, just absolutely no question positive, that Daniel Clamp was watching them right this very second. "Billy, this is exactly what I don't need right now. Do you realize we've got department reviews in 3 weeks? This is a nuclear meltdown disaster, and I mean it." Billy sighed, tried to smile encouragingly. "Sorry, Marla, but, it could have been worse." "Worse? What do you mean, worse?" Her bosom heaved emotionally. Her arms whipped out melodramatically, spraying ashes all over Billy's workstation. "Mr. Forrester's probably going to put this whole department on report just because you've got a messy desk with a vegetable growing on it." She stormed away, still ranting. "Just straighten it out, Billy. Just get your act together, huh? For God's sakes, please." Billy sighed and hid his drawing of Kingston Falls in his pocket. He wondered how a woman like that would have made out in Kingston Falls a few years ago. He shrugged and got down to working. Chapter 4. Kate Barringer ushered her latest group of tourists through the bustling lobby. "The Clamp Center is the most advanced smart building in America, with the latest in security, communications, and climate control," she said in a smart clipped tone, standing tall and cool and confident, as she had been instructed to do always. She beckoned the group, a typical bevy of gawking tourists in polyester clothing and cheap haircuts, to follow her to a staircase. "The Clamp Center," she continued, "is just one part of Mr. Clamp's round-the-world business network, which includes construction, sports, finance, and a popular line of jams and jellies. And of course, those of you who have cable TV at home know Clamp Cable Network. Meanwhile, up in the Clamp Cable TV studios, a video image played in one of the control rooms. The Microwave with Marge show. Marge, a heavy-set woman with a matronly smile, was even now taking a dish from one of the numerous ovens on her set. Some people have written in to say that if they're serving these dishes in a dark room, maybe for those romantic occasions, they notice a glow coming from some of the meat courses. Now, that's perfectly normal. Billy Peltzer watched the image for a moment, and then strode past the control room carrying a shopping bag. He went down a narrow hallway and stepped next to a particularly run-down set. This was the set of Grandpa Fred's House of Horrors, the Clamp Ghost Host movie. It consisted of the prerequisite tilted tombstones, papier-mâché, of course, beside a coffin. Billy stood beside the cameraman. Poor Grandpa Fred, he thought. He really deserves a better shot than this. He's never been quite the same since Clamp had bumped his show out of the primo midnight Saturday slot to the 3:30 a.m. slot. Still, the old trooper was giving his tape segment his very best shot. Grandpa Fred walked along, his hands lifted in predatory fashion, creeping along the floor from which a weak, dry ice fog exuded. His face was turned towards the camera, and he hammed it up in royal fashion. Grandpa Fred did not use a Bela Lugosi accent. Fred's theory was that Grandpa Fred was Dracula's cousin from Dubuque, Iowa. Besides, the only accent he could do was Mexican, and that would have sounded too weird. Tonight's movie is so scary. The people who saw it when it came out in theaters 12 years ago are just learning how to speak simple phrases and eat solid food again. That's right. Talk about scary. It's a good thing your Grandpa Fred is here with you. He lifted his head expectantly, having just cued for a special sound effect. Nothing happened. Billy watched as Grandpa Fred straightened, breaking character, and glared up at the control room with resigned disgust. So, where's the moan? The director in the booth answered over the PA. What? Grandpa Fred slapped his forehead. The moan! There's supposed to be a moan from the back, and I say, Oh, Renfield, you want some more flies, don't you? And I go back there and I open the door. Oh, sorry, Fred, said the director. Can somebody find the tape with the moan? Grandpa Fred sat down, a study in disgust. Billy hastened over to him to try and cheer him up. Hey, hi, Fred. I'm sorry to hear about your new time slot. I think they're making a big mistake. A mistake? Grandpa Fred grunted, all semblance of enthusiasm gone from his manner. Kid, it's a disaster. People that watch TV at 3:30 in the morning are not scared of the Wolf Man. The only thing that scares those people is getting sober and finding work. Yeah. Remembering why he'd come, Billy brightened. Reaching into his shopping bag, he pulled out the mechanized bat that he bought in a knick-knack shop on Columbus Avenue. Fred Stignikowski was just about the only guy in this whole building who made friends with him when he started to work for Clamp Enterprises last year. He'd heard about the rotten scheduling change, and he'd wanted to cheer the old guy up. When Billy started the bat's wings flapping, Grandpa's eyes popped wide open, and he held his hands up to protect himself. Watch it with that thing. Billy stood and placed the bat on top of the cobweb-covered TV set behind the coffin. I thought it would look good over there. Frankly, kid, this was not what I had in mind. said Grandpa Fred, shaking his head, the weight of the world plainly resting on his shoulders. I wanted to do news, public affairs, something meaningful. Billy was upset to see Grandpa Fred looking so sad. Fred was one of the nicest people that Billy knew. A salt-of-the-earth kind of guy who might be running a general store in, say, Kingston Falls. Yeah, Fred would be so much happier in a smaller town, Billy thought. The big city had just crushed the poor guy's dreams and broken his heart. Here was a guy who'd come to the Big Apple hoping for a piece of the action and gotten a mouthful of seeds and worms. Billy groped around for something comforting to say. Horror movies can be meaningful, Fred. You should run some of the classics. Frankenstein, Dracula. Fred's caped shoulders slumped forlornly. All the great horror movies are in black and white. Mr. Clamp only likes color. I don't even have a gimmick. No special effects. A puppet that comes out of a box. Whoopee! Big deal. The director's voice suddenly boomed over the control room public announcement speaker. We got the moan, Fred. Issued from the speaker. It was about as spooky as a whoopee cushion. An expression of infinite distress crossed Fred's features. That's the moan? That's what we've got, Fred, snapped the director's voice, its owner clearly losing patience. And rolling. Grandpa Fred hastily wallowed his way up to a standing position. He assumed his character again with the utter professionalism that Billy admired tremendously. Billy scooted off the set. Oh, Renfield, said Grandpa Fred, you want some nice, delicious, scrumptious, crunchy flies? Well, we'll... Whoops, called the director suddenly. I didn't see what time it was. Sorry, Fred. We'll pick it up right there. Fred lifted his arms in a quiet exasperation, shaking his head and smiling. This was what Billy liked most about Fred. Even in his darkest moment, even when he was clearly depressed as a cat on the wrong side of a steamroller, Fred could see the ironic humor in it all. They walked out towards the mall to get a clamp burger. Have you seen him? Who, Billy? Daniel Clamp. Well, no, not in person, but just look at this building. He waved his right arm expansively. You know what kind of tenants they have here? There's a research laboratory upstairs, genetic research, fooling around with animals, cutting them up. Last week, they took out a patent on a new kind of gerbil. People think I'm creepy. Well, I wanted to get away from Kingston Falls. Billy looked around them as they walked out into the large mall. The glass of the atrium walls glittered above them. The lunch hour crowd jammed the lines of different food stalls. I guess I did. You got that right, kid. Have you heard these voices they have here now? Don't look at me like that. You know the white noise they play all the time? He waved distractedly at the semi-hidden speakers, pumping it out. The static? Yeah, that's so that they can put people close together and they won't overhear each other. You're not supposed to notice it. Sure, but if you listen to it, there are little voices in there. You can almost hear what they're saying, but not really. That's a horror movie. The building that wouldn't shut up. What would they do that for? Said Billy as he eyed the menu doubtfully. Clamp Krispies? He was afraid to ask what they were. That's what the world's coming to, kid. You can't even talk to yourself without somebody interrupting. Billy laughed. I'm not kidding. You think I'm kidding? I'm telling you, I've got a theory. When there's too much order in the world, when it gets too much like a machine, clockwork, too much like crazy Clamp Office Center, human nature rebels. 'Cause, Billy, that's the key to remember about life, is you gotta have balance. He turned to the bright, smiling waitress and ordered a big clamp, clamp Krispies and a clamp of cola. The same, said Billy, risking the Krispies as much out of curiosity as anything. Balance, Billy. Order and chaos. Too much order and chaos is gonna come up and kick you in the butt. Grandpa Fred, vampire philosopher, huh? Well, you bet. But I'm not finished. You know, back in the old days, they used to have special crazy days when people got their yayas out. We're talking the lower classes. Men dressed up as women, women dressed up as kings. People pranced around in the street like loonies. And it was good for 'em. Kind of let go of the steam, you know? He leaned over confidentially and tapped Billy's chest with a gentle but firm forefinger. Look around, Billy boy. Don't you feel that steam building up here? Well, said Billy. Well, let me tell you, I do, and I feel it here. He tapped his head. Something's gonna blow soon, and it ain't gonna be Grandpa Fred. 2 trays of paper-wrapped burgers and side orders were pushed out in front of them. They carried them to the tables and chairs held up by huge metal C clamps. So what do you say, Billy? Billy didn't say anything at first. He was thinking about Kingston Falls. Billy had faced chaos, unlike Grandpa Fred had ever witnessed. He sure didn't want to see its likeness again. Could be, Fred. He changed the subject. Let's eat. The clamp Krispies proved to be a combination of French fries and onion rings, all shaped like the letter C. Well, thanks again for joining me for another couple of chapters of the novelization of Gremlins 2, The New Batch. We'll be back next week with more chapters. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the link in the description if you're interested in checking out some of our cool merchandise and t-shirts. And keep reading. Good night.
Clamp Cable Network now leaves the air. We hope you have enjoyed our programming, but more importantly, we hope you have enjoyed life.